We are delighted to be joined today by leading artist and creative technologist Memo Akten, who is presenting a talk on the interconnectedness of humans and machines and what artificial intelligence means for the human experience. Memo is one of 20 artists whose work we're showing in the exhibition downstairs at the Level 3 galleries called Notes from the Ether, From NFTs to AI. It's Singapore's first museum exhibition exploring the phenomena of non-fungible tokens and generative AI. The curators of the exhibition are here with us today, Deborah Lim and Clara, and they'll be joining myself and Memo later on for a panel discussion. So the format of today's event is that we'll start by hearing a little bit about Notes from the Ether by Deborah Lim, before welcoming Memo for his presentation, which will be around 40 minutes. And then we'll finish up with a panel discussion with all four of us. And during the panel discussion, we'd really love to hear your questions. But I want to start by saying just a few words about why Memo is here, which is the exhibition Notes from the Ether. The show offers a glimpse into a new frontier where new technologies are transforming art. Whilst NFTs and generative AI have transformed our understanding of what art can be, these new technologies are also presenting very complex challenges and issues around ownership, authorship, and the automation of creative labour. Notes from the Ether explores these issues. It emerged from a process we call rapid response curating, a new trend within museum curating in which curators and producers respond to urgent issues of the time, or social challenges. We put this exhibition together more quickly than we normally would because we're observing that the challenges that both NFTs and artificial intelligence are posing for art, but also creative labour more broadly, are so profound and so urgent that we wanted to work much more quickly than usual. So to introduce the show, and to give us a little bit of an insight into the context in which Memo's work is being presented, I'd like to welcome to the stage one of the curators of the exhibition, Deborah Lim.
Thank you very much, Honor, and welcome everybody to the talk today. My name is Deborah Lim. I'm the curator of exhibitions at ArtScience Museum. And I'm just going to bring you on a quick 5-minute summary of the Notes from the Ether exhibition. So firstly, this is what you get when you first enter the zone. And you can already see that we went with an exhibition design that referenced screens. We're looking at the latest emerging technologies of NFTs and generative AI. And I had the immense privilege of working with Clara, who I find to be one of the experts in both the art and blockchain sphere. And she brought her expertise with us to this exhibition. Here we feature 20 international artists that are using these emerging technologies in their practice. And it's not to say this is a historical survey or a retrospective of these topics. We wanted to give you a slice of the diversity of perspectives that the artists bring to the fore. There are 7 zones in the exhibition, and we start with the zone called Coded Possibilities. Now, audiences to ArtScience Museum may never have interfaced with NFTs or AI before, and so we wanted to use common themes that could bridge that access. So firstly here, we really exhibit the possibilities of code that artists have used. And we have, for example, Tyler Hobbs and Dandelion Wist, a collaboration between a collector and artist who created together a project called QQL with interactive stations for the audience to try out the model itself. And on the right, we have Lava Labs. For those of you who are familiar with CryptoPunks, this is another project from Lava Labs called Autoglyphs, whereby the entire coding script was experimented to be put onto the blockchain. And we also featured the protoglyph, which was the core of what led to the autoglyphs eventually. And another artist riffing off Lava Labs called Aaron Penn, who then developed a series called Within Without, building upon their code and pushing the boundaries of textures. Our second zone is called co-creation, and here we feature the artist Botto. Now, Botto is an autonomous AI project created, well, the AI art engine was created by pioneering German artist Mario Klingemann, who calls himself its guardian. And Botto itself is meant to operate as an artist. It generates thousands of images every week. It then condenses this using a computational taste model to 350 images, and there is a digital community of humans behind Botto that vote on their favorite piece from the image selection, and this gets minted as an NFT. So on screen, you see 4 examples of this. And what Botto has shown is this interesting conundrum of whether the machine or the humans are the artists in question. And over time, Botto refines its tastes and preferences based on community feedback. Next up, we have a zone called network systems where we're really focusing on the new connections and relationships that are built in the Web3 space. So in our audience today, we have Joe, who's part of Joe and Kapi, who did this amazing work on screen called Enzyme 1.2, where on one hand, they question how each time a digital file is transferred, it degrades a little bit in quality. And this interactive installation allows you to scan the QR codes in relation to the AI-generated images. Pixels start to appear on screen and gradually consume the images and digest it in the system. So please check it out if you're downstairs at the exhibition later. Other artists we have in this zone are Sarah Friend, who has produced a series called Lifeforms, where you almost take care of an NFT. And in order to keep it alive, you have to give it away within 90 days. So she builds a community of care amongst collectors that is quite the antithesis to the speculation and volatility of the NFT market. And we also have Burak Arikan presenting a work called Social Contracts, revealing the invisible connections in an NFT collector's wallet. Now we have Bitcoin by Sarah Mayo-Hess in a zone we call physical digital, where these worlds really collide. And Sarah Mayo-Hess predated Ethereum. She created her own token called Bitcoin in 2015. And in order to she pegged the value of her future artwork to this token. So you're almost investing in an artist's future. And this whole idea of value and between the tangible and intangible is explored, and it's a fascinating project. Other artists we have in this section include Ria Myers, Simon Denny, Mitchell F. Chan. We move on to technology as the extension of the self, and here we feature the incredible artist Holly Herndon and her partner Matthew Dryhurst, who have done so much work into exploring AI as well as IP rights. So here, what Holly did was she created a custom AI model and asked it to generate self-portraits of Holly Herndon, and you can see the diversity of styles that the AI has generated. We also have in the extension of this zone, Ninad Kothawade, who's also in our audience today, who created a wonderful artwork called Consume with likenesses of himself fed into Stable Diffusion. And he addresses the technological anxiety when AI is in question. Does the artist still have as much agency and creative freedom? How do they establish an original style? And that comes up with the advent of new technologies. And our final zone called Collective Futures, which leaves you with an open question. Now, we did a rapid response exhibition when a lot of questions about AI remain unanswered. Is it really good for society? Does it form a fundamental co-pilot moving forward? Or is it a threat to our entire existence? Now, we let the audience make their own decisions here. But what you see on screen is a collaboration between Tezos, the energy-efficient blockchain, with Taiwanese artist Aluan Wang and developer Akaswap, which allows the audience to mint their own NFT with an AI transformation. And finally, we have our star of the show today, Memo Akten's work. This is his iconic work called Deep Meditations, which we have in a projection room in the show. I will let him expand more about his practice, but just to give you a sense of the wonderful work that he creates. So I really hope all of you have a chance to visit the show after this talk or in the following week as we conclude it on 24th September. Thank you so much.
Could we just get some more light? Thank you. So it's now my great pleasure to introduce our key speaker for today. Memo Akten is a multidisciplinary artist, musician, and researcher. He's originally from Turkey and is now based in Los Angeles, where he's flew just to be with us today. For more than a decade, Memo's work has been exploring AI, big data, and collective consciousness to reflect on the human condition. Over the years, he's exhibited at the V&A, the Royal Opera House, Shanghai Ming Contemporary Art Museum, Mori Art Museum, the Royal Festival Hall, the Barbican, and numerous other galleries, festivals, and museums. Amongst the many awards that he's won for his work, he's the winner of the prestigious Prix Ars Electronica. Memo was also one of the founders of the collective Marshmallow Laser Feast, and since 2014 has been developing his own practice and research. He's currently an assistant professor of computational new media at the University of California, San Diego. Memo's moving images, installations, and performances explore the intricacies of human-machine entanglements, states of consciousness, and the tensions between ecology, technology, science, and spirituality. To tell us more about his art, please help me welcome to the stage Memo Akten.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for that introduction, Honor, and to everybody for inviting me both to be part of this wonderful exhibition, but also to be here today with you to speak. The title of my talk is Deeper Meditations. This is both the title of my other work in the exhibition, but also the kind of a play on words on my work that Deborah was showing, Deep Meditations. I'd like to start by asking, what does love look like? What does grief look like? What does faith look like? Or ritual, worship? Could we teach a machine these concepts? Could a machine even understand these concepts? I hate to disappoint you, but I'm not going to answer those questions. But I am going to kind of oscillate around those topics. But first, I'd like to begin by giving a very brief overview of the kind of general themes behind my work. I tweeted this in 2015. I realized that all my work was about waves or gods, and that somehow quantum mechanics unified the two. And with the term waves, looking back, I think I was referring to the patterns in nature which we humans have managed to recognize, deconstruct, and formalize into theories and equations that we somehow even find elegant or beautiful. And with the term gods, I was referring to those mysterious aspects of nature which we have yet to understand, and the lengths we go to, the stories we invent in our attempts to make sense of them. And with quantum mechanics, I was referring to the fringes of human knowledge, which we empirically know to be accurate and can understand through the language of mathematics, but we're not yet able to fully comprehend on a deeper level. And within this backdrop, I investigate the tensions between technology, ecology, science, and spirituality. I try to draw connections between intelligence in nature, intelligence in machines, perception, consciousness, neuroscience, biology, physics, and philosophies of spirituality, ritual, and religion. I am inspired by nature, or rather the nature of nature, the fundamental forces and underlying processes that shape everything that happens around and inside us. When I look at a flower, I see the nuclear fusion in the heart of the sun, the photons scattering in the atmosphere to create a crimson sky, the photosynthesis that fuels all of life on Earth, the fluid dynamics driving the wind and the waves crashing on the shore, and the complex ecosystems that cultivate via a symbiotic spread of seeds. I study these hidden processes that shape our world, and I develop systems that abstract behavior. And I'm fascinated by our capacity to dig deeper and discover and learn more about the poetry of nature. I write code. That's my craft, so to speak. I write code to create speculative simulations and data dramatizations. I write code to create moving images, experimental animations, sounds, and to control moving images, robotic lights, and lasers. I collaborate with dancers. I collaborate with machines. I build interactive systems exploring meaningful human control. I create visual instruments that augment our capacity for creative expression, immersive environments that respond to human presence, computational systems that allow and foster expressive human-machine interaction. I work with emerging technologies, thinking of these technologies as extensions of our body, as extensions of our mind, thinking about their impact on us as individuals, how we behave and express ourselves, and ultimately their impact on culture, ethics, law, tradition, ritual, and religion. I think a lot about ritual and religion, not necessarily the old, well-established rituals, religions, or forms of spirituality, but rather their new, evolved incarnations, new rituals, new spiritual frameworks, new forms of worship, and the values enmeshed with the technologies that we're creating. What I'm really fascinated by is we, who are biologically identical to what we were 200,000 years ago. How do we cope and adapt throughout the crazy technological developments that we've lived through? And I think of rituals as algorithms for the body and the mind that transform our mental and emotional state to otherwise unattainable modes of being. And this is why in a lot of my work, I'm trying to capture and convey these sensations that we might relate to as spiritual or even religious experiences. I enjoy treading the lines between comfortable and uncomfortable and embrace the contradictory complexities of our techno-culture. So in my practice, I try to advance both critical perspectives on these emerging technologies and social power dynamics. But at the same time, I also strive to create meditative and introspective environments that nurture a sense of wonderment, awe, connection to the planet, connection to the cosmos, connection to each other and all living beings. And I think a lot about the mind, the human mind, non-human minds, biological minds, synthetic minds, distributed minds. I think a lot about intelligence in humans, in nature, in machines, and this is ultimately the topic that I ended up getting a PhD in. I'm really interested in the technologies and the politics of these technologies and where AI as a concept came from and how the technologies have manifested themselves today in our lives and the social and cultural implications of the path that they're on. But I'm equally fascinated by a more speculative metaphysics of AI as reflections of ourselves, as reflections on how we perceive the world, on how we make meaning, as a computational lens on trying to understand ourselves, understand the nature of the mind, and perhaps eventually even consciousness. So yeah, let's talk about AI. That's what I'm here for. According to the internet, this is what AI looks like. It's very blue and shiny. And for the last 10 plus years, every year I think AI hype could not get bigger. And every year I get proven wrong. AI mania manages to go even higher than I was expecting. And here we are in 2023, where AI mania is indeed through the roof. So the term AI is I don't really like it. No one likes it. I'm gonna try not to use it. It's very broad, has lots of sci-fi imagery and connotations. I'd like to narrow it down a bit. Today, when we hear the word AI, we're really talking about a subfield of AI called machine learning. I'm sure most of you have heard of this. And really, it's a subfield of machine learning, which is deep learning. That is what is happening right now. So what is machine learning? Bit of maths. I bet you weren't expecting that. Now, this is about as much maths as I'm going to do. So normally when we write a program, we would write this function, a procedure. We write a program. And this program does something, and we feed it some kind of input, X, which can be anything, images, videos, sound, keyboard input, etc. And this function that we write produces some output, Y. This PowerPoint presentation is an example of this. It's a function which produces an output. The thing with this kind of programming is the programmer, you or me, needs to know exactly what we want this function to do and how it is going to perform that. With machine learning, we don't do that. What we do is we provide examples of how we want the end results to behave. We tell the system what we want it to achieve. And then we write a learning function, and the algorithm figures out what this function should be. So now, why is this interesting? Charles Babbage, one of the key figures in modern computing, some of you might be familiar. He designed a bunch of mechanical computers in the 1800s, the most notable of which is the analytical engine. It's probably the first fully programmable general-purpose computer. And I say general-purpose here because humans have been building some kind of computers for many, many millennia. But the idea with this one is it could theoretically perform any computable function. It was never built because he could never get funding, and he had fights with everyone. But we know a lot about this machine through the notes of Lady Ada Lovelace, who some of you might know as the world's first computer programmer. She came across Babbage as a teenager, and she was intrigued by these computers that he was building, and she wrote a lot about them. Particularly in 1843, her notes are very famous. And she's got centuries of foresight in these notes. For example, she famously wrote, "The analytical engine weaves algebraic patterns, just as the jacquard loom weaves flowers and leaves." So in 1843, she essentially described what we now call generative art. And one of her most profound insights was, while Babbage was trying to build a machine that could calculate anything, she hypothesized that we could treat these numbers as symbols, and then we could do true general purpose computing. So she went on to say that it might be able to compose elaborate and scientific pieces of music of any degree of complexity or extent. So here she is in 1843 predicting generative music as well. She went on to say this very oft-quoted, very controversial statement. "The analytical engine has no pretensions whatever to originate anything. It can do whatever we know how to order it to perform. It can follow analysis, but it has no power of anticipating any analytical revelations or truths. Its province is to assist us in making available what we are already acquainted with." And for 2 centuries, we have been arguing over whether she was right or not in saying this. Countless essays, books, exhibitions later, we are still not really decided on what the answer is. A century after Lovelace, Alan Turing, in his seminal 1950 essay, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, addresses this statement, and he calls it Lady Lovelace's objection. He starts this essay with the question, can machines think? Again, a question that we're still grappling with 3/4 of a century later. He proposes that in order for a machine to be considered to originate anything, it has to surprise people. even its programmer. And he notes that machines take me by surprise with great frequency. On top of that, around the early 20th century, the Spanish neuroscientist Santiago Ramón Cajal, his Nobel Prize-winning work, he had uncovered the neural networks of our brain. This inspired many computer scientists, including Turing, and he theorized already in 1948 something that neither Babbage nor Lovelace could have even imagined, and that is machines that reprogram themselves, machines that learn. So Turing goes on to propose, instead of trying to produce a program to simulate the adult mind, why not rather try to produce one which simulates the child's? If we then subject this to an appropriate course of education, one would obtain the adult brain. And he adds, an important feature of a learning machine is that its teacher will often be very largely ignorant of what is happening inside. And this is simultaneously the most interesting and exciting, but also most terrifying aspect of machine learning. It's exciting because it allows us to build machines that can do things that we don't know as their creators how to do. For example, stabilize the plasma inside a tokamak nuclear fusion reactor, potentially bringing us one step closer to almost limitless renewable clean energy, or to predict the 3D structure of a protein from the sequence of its constituent amino acids, potentially bringing us one step closer to ridding the world of diseases like cancer or Alzheimer's. But of course, the idea of machines that learn such that its teacher is ignorant of what's happening inside is also terrifying for many reasons. But not because the machines might rise and take over, but rather who is building these machines and why are they building them and what are their values and is it aligned with the well-being of all human, non-human, living and non-living beings? So that was machine learning in a nutshell. We implement an algorithm to learn inside function f. And then there's deep learning, as I mentioned, as a subfield of machine learning. This is what's dominating everything in AI right now. Here, what we do is we break down this task of learning this function f into learning lots of little sub-functions in the hope that it makes learning this complex problem more manageable. So deep learning operates on what we call high-dimensional raw data. And when you pipe data through a deep neural network, it is literally a journey through multiple dimensions and transformations in space and time. Because every little box that you see here is itself a high-dimensional, nonlinear transformation, learning and extracting unique features from the previous boxes to learn and build a hierarchy of increasingly abstract representations. And amidst the depths of these transformations is the great unknown. This is from 2015. It's probably one of the first videos ever made with deep learning. I'm using an algorithm called Deep Dream, some of you might remember. In the summer of 2015, certain parts of the internet were completely flooded with this kind of aesthetic. It was discovered by a researcher called Alexander Mordvintsev, who discovered it kind of by accident at Google. And I know everyone hates Deep Dream. I really love it. But it's not the aesthetics that I love, it's the poetry of what's happening. To explain it very, very briefly, this is an image classification network. It's an artificial neural network that's been trained to recognize and classify objects in images. When it is presented with an image that it doesn't recognize, such as my face, what the Deep Dream algorithm does is it runs the network backwards and says, modify this image such that it amplifies certain activations in the depths of the neural network. So this is a bit like me saying to you, you look at that cloud and draw what you think you see. So if you think you see a rabbit, you draw it like a rabbit. And then I say, okay, look at what you drew, and now draw what you think you see in that. So it's a confirmation bias feedback loop. But the reason why I loved, and already that is, I think, quite interesting, but the reason why I really love Deep Dream is because we look at this and we say, oh, look, it's a bunch of puppy slugs and bird lizards. But actually, there's no such thing as a bird lizard or a puppy slug. What's happening is we're seeing textures here that we are trying to make sense of, that we have activations in our brain that say, okay, that looks like a puppy, and we amplify those. But those textures were amplified by this artificial neural network. So what's happening is we're entangled in this loop, this duet for trying to make meaning. And this has been one of the themes I've been really fascinated by with AI, that I'm going to talk about more, that we essentially using machines that learn as a way to reflect on how we make sense of the world. Because we can put this into an artificial neural network. This is pure random white noise. And it goes on this long journey through multiple dimensions and transformations in space and time, because that's what a deep neural network is, to produce this. And then this is a more structured noise with a more particular distribution, and we are machines that yearn structure. It's who we are, it's what we've always done. We look for patterns, and we find them, and we project what we know onto them. We invent stories, and we believe these stories. This is how we deal with uncertainty. It's how we connect with each other. We invent rituals, algorithms for the body and mind that transform our mental and emotional state to otherwise unattainable modes of being. We see things not as they are, but as we are. Everything that you see or read or hear, even these sentences that I'm saying right now, you're trying to make sense of by relating to your own past experiences, filtered by your prior beliefs and knowledge. And actually, I have no idea what any of what I'm saying means to any of you. It's impossible for me to see the world through your eyes, to feel what you feel without having read everything you've read, seen everything you've seen, and lived everything you've lived. And this makes empathy and compassion much harder than we might think. And that makes them all the more valuable and crucial. This is from a series of work called Learning to See. It's an artificial neural network running real-time inference on a camera input. And there's a few themes behind this work. On a practical level, it's exploring expressive human-machine interaction, so investigating deep learning as a way to develop systems that augment human creative expression. But there are higher-level motivations. This is a network which has seen nothing but thousands of images of clouds or waves or flowers. And now it looks onto the world and it sees my desk, my hands, and it tries to make sense of what it's seeing in context of what it's seen before. But it can only see through the filter of what it already knows, just like us, because we too see things not as they are, but as we are. As well as a number of videos, this exists as an installation. There's a plinth with a bunch of junk on it, some broken cables, rags and keys, stuff like that. And you can spend a few seconds playing with them for a quick bit of fun, or if you're like me, you can spend hours meticulously trying to craft your perfect bouquet or shaping your perfect wave. And the models I trained were inspired by the classic elements of nature. Perhaps every culture has their own cosmogenesis and the idea of how reality is constructed. So flowers represents earth, the ocean is water, of course, there's fire, clouds represents air or wind, and the fifth element beyond our planet, the cosmos. This was trained on thousands of images from the Hubble Space Telescope. I'd like to distill this theme a bit. So that project was 2017. This one is also 2017. It's called Fight. It uses VR as a technology, but it's about as non-VR, I think, as a project could be. I'll explain shortly. Our eyes are often likened to cameras, as if light falls on the retina, forms an image, and then gets sent to the brain for processing. But that's not how seeing works at all. In the days of the ancient Greeks, it was believed that we shot rays out of our eyes, and upon these rays hitting objects, we could see. Even people like Plato believed this and wrote that the eye contained a fire that has the property not of burning, but of yielding a gentle light. And when it strikes upon any object it encounters outside, it passes on the motions of anything it comes in contact with throughout the whole body to the soul, and thus causes the sensation we call seeing. Euclid, Ptolemy, and many other great thinkers for centuries elaborated on this idea that is known as the extramission theory of vision. I find it a really beautiful, beautiful theory. It is, of course, wrong. Even back then, many centuries before Newton, the Islamic scholar and mathematician Ibn al-Haytham wrote that seeing happened when these particles would bounce off objects and enter the eye. And of course, we know that's how seeing happens. Photons bounce off objects and enter the eye. This we call the intramission theory of vision. But I still really like the extramission theory for one reason. It underlies an aspect of vision that often gets forgotten, that seeing is an active process. The part of the retina which is actually full color and high resolution is the fovea, which is tiny, 2-degree field of view, so about 2 thumbnails at full arm's length. Everything outside of this is quite low resolution and mostly black and white. Yet my conscious experience of vision is this crystal clear, more than 180-degree field of view. And actually, because what's happening is my eyes are constantly saccading. My brain is sending signals to my eyes to jump around, to saccade a few times a second, and then every time my eye fixates, my brain adjusts focus and exposure, and then as my eye moves again, my brain is integrating all this information between the movements that my body and my head and my eyes are making, along with the signals that are coming, and then matching these to the predictions that the brain is making. And so my brain is constructing this mental model in my mind of what the outside world is. We know a lot of this thanks to the Russian scientist Alfred Yarbus, with his seminal research in the 60s, with what looks like this torture device, this eye tracking device that he built. And he found that the meaning that we try to extract from a situation affects the way that our eyes unconsciously scans the scene. For example, he did these studies where he showed people this painting, An Unexpected Visitor, by Ilya Repin, and asked questions such as, how old are the people in this painting? How long has the visitor been away? What were the people doing before they came in? And he tracked their eyes, and he found that people's eyes scanned the scene differently. Our eyes are continually unconsciously scanning the world, and most of this information doesn't make it to our conscious awareness. There are some similarities between the eye and a camera in the fact that there's like a focus and a lens, etc. But the similarities end there. The philosopher Al-Noe likens seeing with the eyes more like how a blind person would touch the world to build the model. We saccade, we move our hands, we find salient features, and then we integrate this. So the last thing I'd like to talk about for this project is this phenomenon known as binocular rivalry, which has been known for centuries. Surprisingly, it hasn't been explored artistically that much. And this is a very, very fascinating phenomenon. Normally, our 2 eyes see the world from slightly different perspectives, and the brain constructs a 3D percept from this parallax between the 2 eyes. If we were to give the 2 eyes radically different images, then the brain is unable to create a coherent percept out of this. And what happens is we get what's known as a bistable state. What is elevated to our conscious awareness is an image that is fluctuating between the two. The 2 signals are fighting for attention. And for example, if the left eye sees red and black vertical lines and the right eye sees blue and black horizontal lines, your conscious awareness will see something perhaps similar to what I've labeled as a mixed percept. And I say perhaps because in reality, it's impossible for me to know what you will see because it depends on your physiology. It even depends on what you've been doing that day and your mood and everything. So this is actually how everything is. This is how even normal seeing is, but we just take that for granted. So with this project, I was trying to underline that it's impossible for me to see through your eyes. So these are the motivations. I won't summarize again, just to put it very briefly. Perception is an active process. We construct our perceptions, and it's based on who we are, what we believe in, what we already know. And it's impossible for me to see the world through your eyes. And this works as a metaphor. I made this project at a time when Brexit was happening, when Trump was coming to power. I'm from Turkey, and Turkey's been kind of torn in half over polarization for a few decades now. And so this was really a response to the increasing social and political polarization that I was seeing in my home country and in England, which is where I was living. So I made this VR piece called Fight. It's an installation. It looks like this. The setting was really important. I wanted people, when they enter the space, to feel like they're about to go on a journey. I wanted it to feel quite comfortable and homely. And I fought really hard for this chair because the experience is so disorienting that I really wanted a seat where people felt like they could completely let themselves go and know that they're safe. They're not going to fall over. They're kind of swallowed by this chair. And it's not a nauseating experience because there's no movement. In VR, usually movement creates nausea. This is not nauseating. This is just alien. The word people keep using is trippy, which is really interesting because we don't have a very rich vocabulary for experiences that are outside of our day-to-day. The only word we have is trippy. So people said it was trippy, and it is very, very trippy. I'll show some excerpts. So it's a 10-minute linear experience. So I use a VR headset so I can send different signals to each eye. But it's not a VR experience at all because it's... Oh, here's a very interesting thing, actually. I'll jump onto this. So throughout the 10 minutes, I play with rivalry. Rivalry comes and goes. So at the moment, there's no rivalry. This is a mode where wherever you look, the world starts deforming. So this is kind of the idea that seeing is an active process. By looking somewhere, you are creating your reality. At this point, you're inside a room, and it's a big, large room, about this big maybe, in VR, and it feels like you're inside a room, and there's this room exterior to you. And wherever you look, it deforms. Right about now, rivalry starts kicking in. The two rooms in your two eyes are rotating in opposite directions, and now it's completely rivalry. As rivalry comes in, and your brain is unable to integrate them into a 3D percept, what happens is the image ceases to be external to you and jumps to be located inside your head. So even if you look at a 2D image with one eye, you still feel it as external to yourself. But when there's rivalry, at least my experience is, it feels like the image is inside your head, which is how seeing always is, actually. But again, we forget these things. And this was another scene where, again, wherever you look, you're constructing your own reality. Here, for example, the main structure, there's different kinds of rivalry. The main structure here is the same for both eyes. So you see this structure as solid, as external to you. But the particles outside it, they're different for each eye. So those you don't see as objects in the world, you see them inside your head. Also, the colors are different, and that creates a very interesting shimmering effect. But in the interest of time, I want to move on to deep meditations. This is one of the works that I'm showing downstairs. And I'll start by showing some different versions that I've shown because it's always a site-specific installation. This was at the UCCA Center for Contemporary Art in Beijing in 2020. This was Sonar Festival in Barcelona 2019. This was a 9-story high installation at an atrium in London designed by Norman Foster. And kind of one of my favorites was a 2,500-year-old Zen Buddhist temple in Kyoto, Kenninji Temple. I was invited by the Japanese artist Naoko Tosa, who works very much in the Zen and Shintoist tradition, and she thought it would be very suitable to show there. And this is one of my favorite photos as we're setting up with the technician and the monk of the temple. We are consecrating the arrival of the holy blue light. So I ask once again, what does love look like? What does grief look like? What does faith look like? You know what love is, not because someone taught you what love is, but because you felt it in your body. And then someone told you the name and said, that's what you were feeling right now is called love. And you learned to associate that label with that feeling that you were having in your body, your inner state at that time, so to speak. And then you saw someone else say that they loved, and you observed how they acted, and you again learned to associate that label with their actions, and you expanded your concept of love to include those. And this is how we build our understanding of the world. We have internal feelings, and we learn to associate language with our inner state. So these are very abstract, subjective concepts that don't have clearly defined, objective visual representations. It's not something that can be programmed in. So with deep meditations, there were many themes, and one of them was exploring this angle. So I trained a neural network on what our subjective experience of these very abstract emotions are, or more specifically, what our collective consciousness thinks they are, as archived in the cloud by the keeper of our collective consciousness. So I scraped hundreds of thousands of images from the then quite popular photo sharing website Flickr, tagged with these words: love, art, faith, ritual, worship, God, etc. And I trained this neural network on them. The neural network isn't learning what these concepts really are, it's learning what we think they are as archived by Flickr, as we've shared and we've put in the cloud. The sound is another neural network that I trained on hours of religious and spiritual chants, prayers and rituals from around the world that I got from YouTube. And the result is a 60-minute, very, very slow, meditative journey of slowly evolving images and sounds through the imagination of these artificial neural networks. The images you're seeing are not the images I downloaded, but they're generated by the neural network, where all of these concepts have just been mashed together into these images that are on the boundaries between abstract and representative. And another theme of this work was I was really curious to explore the use of a deep neural network as a medium for creative expression and storytelling and filmmaking with meaningful human control. Particularly at the time, a lot of these kind of so-called latent space explorations were random. And I wanted to make a film. I wanted to see if it was possible to control what images were being made. And effectively, I wanted to sequence and make a film in this space. So I had to make bespoke tools. They didn't exist. And I constructed these precise journeys. In fact, I presented a paper on this at an academic conference in 2018 now it's called NeurIPS, then it was called NIPS. And the film is ultimately a meditation on life, nature, the universe, and our relationship and our subjective experience of it. The full film is 60 minutes, as I said, and here is the entire film with many details removed, condensed to 1 minute. It takes us through the birth of the cosmos, formation of the planets and Earth, rocks, the seas, the spark of life, evolution, the kind of diversity and expansion of life, geological changes, formations of ecosystems, the birth of humanity, civilization, settlements, culture, history, war, art, ritual, worship, religion, science, technology. So it really is a brief history of almost everything. But of course, ultimately, what you see depends on who you are. As we look at these abstract, evolving images conjured up by the neural network, we complete the loop of meaning making. We project ourselves back onto them. We invent stories based on what we know and what we believe, because we see things not as they are, but as we are. And we complete the loop. And that is the end of my talk. Thank you very much for your patience and listening.
Thank you very much, Memo, for that fantastic talk. I'd like to welcome up to the stage the two curators of Notes from the Ether. You've met Deborah Lim already from ArtScience Museum, and I'm also very, very pleased to have Clara with us, the co-curator of the exhibition. I am sure you have many questions kind of for Memo, so I'm going to open it out directly to the audience to ask if we've got any burning questions. We've got one in the centre there already from Joe, who's part of the exhibition.
Thank you. Yeah, that was really eye-opening. I would say that, like, I understand the way that we see things through these generated images as like an active interpretation from our mind. But in your work, you also have audio components, and I was just wondering, how does sound play into your work, and what's the importance of interpreting through sound as well? Because in my mind, I'm more of a visual person, so visually, I would try to defer meaning more than through audio. So how do you use sound in your work?
Yeah, it's on. It's on.
It is on.
Yep.
Is it on? Okay. Yeah, very good question. I didn't talk much about sound. Sound is very important to me. For example, deep meditations has sound, and to me, it's not the same with sound. It's absolutely essential part of the experience is sound. Again, it's all about, I guess, we're using all kinds of cues, whether it's sound or visuals, or in the case of the VR piece, you know, the little rug, the plants, about setting the mind of the audience in a particular state. Because, you know, there's that saying, set and setting, when one takes drugs, I've been told. But the idea is that where your mind is when you're about to go into an experience affects how you interpret that. So using sound is part of that for me. In deep meditations, I trained a neural network on lots of chants and prayers and things like that. What you hear is not that, but you do get a glimpse of a human-like texture in it. And that, I think, sets the mental state of the audience to perceive the visuals in a particular way. That is one aspect of sound. So it's generally about, let me say, a mood setter, but also in lots of other projects, not any that I showed, I use sound a lot because I'm fascinated by how we perceive sound so differently. Like, I can look at you and I can estimate you're, I don't know, 7 meters away from me, maybe 6, 7 meters. But if I heard you, there's no way I could estimate that accurately distance. But timing-wise, we're generally way more precise with sound. Like, if you were clapping and your clapping was slightly offbeat, I'm much more attuned to detecting milliseconds, even less than sub-milliseconds, sonically than I am a flashing image. So we've developed these different sensibilities through evolution to sound and visuals, and I do love exploring those different sensibilities that we have to sound and images.
I want to bring curators into the conversation because these kinds of considerations would have been very much in your mind as you were developing the wider Notes from the Ether show, a show that's bringing together both artificial intelligence, whereas we should really correctly refer to it machine learning, and kind of art on the blockchain. So, Clara, you've worked with both of these kind of technologies, the communities around those technologies, and the ideas explored kind of through these communities in your curatorial practice before. What were you trying to say curatorially with Notes from the Ether?
I think when we started sort of brainstorming or trying to map out a narrative for Notes from the Ether, we were very clear in that this landscape is just very quickly evolving and continuously evolving. And we wanted to take this as an opportunity to reflect on what's been done, what's been said, but also to give a glimpse into what is to come. I think with artists like Memo, you've worked in these areas of emerging technologies for such a long time with such a wide body of work. We also wanted to bring some attention to this practice, to the history that has come before this moment of, I think, increased attention towards new media, to digital art, and to also bridge some of the gaps in those narratives, to demonstrate some of that historical precedence that has come before this moment, the references we are making, the parallels that there are to wider art history, but also to demonstrate how new practices, new kinds of ways of working are emerging because of whether it's a blockchain or it's new kinds of digital communities or it's new sort of discourses that are making more expensive, I think, ways of looking at art possible because of the increased attention and resources dedicated towards new media. So I think that was a big part of what we wanted to highlight, but we still wanted to keep it open enough that it really demonstrated that these practices are both engaging but also querying the technologies that we're speaking on. They're not just sort of empty 100% positive embraces of like crypto 100% or specific parts of AI 100%, but rather they're negotiations with the tools as they are developing. Artists like Memo have been building so much of that discourse, whether it's papers you've presented or coming up with new ways of working with that technology. We also wanted to make that visible because artists have historically often been some of the first to adopt new tools and technologies, but also have this great influence over whether it's the market or the infrastructure that then gets developed on them. So much about AI now is about like copyright or consent. And we also wanted to highlight that actually a lot of artists in the show are actively participating in these conversations and trying to build that infrastructure. And so, yeah, I think a lot of that.
And also build the conversation, the debate, the community around those tools. I have the feeling that we have a lot of questions that are gestating in the audience. So can I have, yes, we've got one over here. And I'm going to ask you to kind of wait for the mic because otherwise we won't be able to hear you at all. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, I have a question about what you said right at the start. You asked, what does love look like, etc. Yeah, so very interesting that a lot of your work focuses on visual. But at somewhere later on, you mentioned about how feelings are constructed based on internal responses, right? So therefore, interoception is extremely important, right? The feelings from the heart, skin conductance, and so on. And I'm wondering, how can artists bring in interoceptive experiences? Like, how can you make somebody's heart race or their skin sweat if you want to make them experience a particular emotional state? Because these kind of things are, well, to a fair amount hardwired.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I guess ultimately that is many artists' goal anyway, like to create that kind of a response. And I will say, like with Fight, the VR piece, my goal was definitely, I wanted to make something which was going to be dependent on people's physiology. Like what they experience will be dependent on their physiology. And even saying that actually is a bit of a contradiction, because I said in my talk that everything, like what you see is different to what you see to what you see. So we already know that, and that's dependent on your physiology. But I wanted to make this project that was exposing that, so that people would know that what you experience depends on what's happening inside you. With regards to making someone's heart pulse, etc., I don't think that's actually that difficult. When VR was first happening, you know, people were doing things like putting them on the top of a building or having a great white shark attack them. And it's actually quite easy to make people scared. But to create really meaningful experiences to them, that's the ongoing challenge, which I don't know the formula for.
Thank you for that. I can see some hands up, but I wanted to just kind of follow up that question, kind of around trying to, I guess, stimulate specific types of responses from the audience with a question for Deborah. Deborah, we've heard from Clara in terms of the ideas that she was hoping to convey kind of within the exhibition. But as one of our curators working in ArtScience Museum with a fairly good understanding of the audience that we have here, what were you trying to make people feel with the show?
I think when it comes to NFTs and AI, these topics are in the news, they're in our social consciousness, but many people may not have perhaps a visual association with what this means, or might feel that there's a barrier to entry with a lot of the technicalities or the jargon. And so what we were trying to do was to bring together these two very divergent themes in common topics. Something like technology as the extension of the self is something that everyone can understand. I have my mobile phone and I'm so dependent on it. Maybe in future that's AI, and I can't live without it. And it was also a very intentional decision to play with the diversity of presentations. So not everything is on a square monitor. Things can be experienced. We showed the behind the scenes of some of the works, such as Harm van den Dorpel's Mutant Garden Autobreeder, where you're seeing a process of evolution. And so it's a little bit like unraveling or pulling aside the curtain to give people that desire for their own curious approach. And we didn't want to be too prescriptive. It was an open-ended invitation to explore these topics.
Speaking of pulling back the curtain, there's been something I've been really wanting to ask you, Memo, since you got here. So your day job, so to speak, at the moment is assistant professor of computational new media at the University of California. I suspect that a big part of your work with your students is around machine learning and deep learning right now. I'm really curious to know how you teach that class in 2023, you know, kind of in the context of this field moving so far, so quickly, and whether there's a feedback loop, if you want, between the conversations you're having with your students, kind of and your own work and what they're learning.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I've been professor there for 3 years, and it's my first day job ever. But anyway, I teach undergrads and graduate students, and I'm in the visual arts department. It's mostly kind of contemporary art focus. We have some computational arts students, so they come knowing how to program, for example. And the first 2 years, I gave a kind of machine learning for artists class to undergrads that knew a little bit of programming, and it was doable. And then 2021 happened, and I opened the class up to the whole department, so you don't need any computing skills because we had things like Midjourney and GPT, all that stuff came out. And it's actually really fascinating. So the speed at which it was moving meant that I stopped preparing for class. I would just turn up and like, this is what happened this week. What happened, that I was, on my way this morning, I saw this tweet, let's unpack it. And that is how it happened. So this year, this last fall, that's how I did class. I didn't prepare, I just covered what happened that week, and that was enough to fill 3 hours. Half of the students, and I get students from like sculpture, painting, music, theater, all kinds. Half of them would go away horrified. Half of them were super excited, like, oh my God, I can do this now. So that was very interesting, just to see within my class of 15, the division of horror and excitement. I also gave an AI class to graduate students, and they're kind of amazing. They're like colleagues. It's speaking to them is like speaking with colleagues. So they had very wonderful ideas and critical perspectives, and that was very replenishing for me as well.
Super interesting. I asked that question because I know we have several people here from kind of the education sector. Questions from the floor. I think we've got one over here, and I did see a hand up over here as well. So we're going to take 2, maybe 3 more questions, and then I'm getting the 3 minutes to go wrap call.
Hi, Memo. Thanks for the very insightful talk. Can I ask whether AI is a tool, collaborator, or a creator? The reason being, like Midjourney and Stable Diffusions, they have allowed regular people like me, to create artwork. And if I do a bit of in-painting and put very detailed prompts, how should I view it? Has the barriers been lowered, or is AI the creator of the art, or am I the creator of art because I'm giving it inputs and manipulating the output? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. It's a very big question. I'll start by saying in 2018, I did a live performance with a vocalist called Jennifer Walsh. She's a Dadaist poet, amazing, amazing vocal performer. And we did a project together where for 1 year, she sent me daily improvs that she did, video and audio, and I trained a model on this. So I built a model of her, visual and audio, and then we did a live performance where she improvised live with her AI version. The AI version would listen to her, respond, and it would generate the face. And it was quite. People were like, some people cried. It was really quite a thing. But I was on stage as well. I was side, not in the lights, but I was there at a computer, and everyone was asking me, "So what are you doing on stage?" And like, what are you adjusting? And I realized it was impossible for me to explain what I was doing without explaining the full technicality of what was happening. So I had to resort to metaphor. And the only metaphor I could come up with, and all metaphors are flawed, this is very flawed, but the only metaphor I could come up with was, I'm the lion tamer, that for 1 year have been taming this lion, and now I'm on stage, and I'm there with my whip to make sure that it stays within the space of desirable behavior. And that is what I was doing. I was playing with sliders in real time. That would mean nothing to anybody but me. Now, I don't need this metaphor to understand what I'm doing, because I know exactly what I'm doing. But the word, so now I use the term, I'm an AI wrangler. But that is a metaphor, and actually all language is metaphor. So when we say, are you the creator, are you the collaborator, these are words which were invented or evolved in a time that I don't think applies to creating on the internet, where our minds are all connected to each other at the speed of light. So I don't think there's an answer to that question, basically.
But I would like to know what our curators think, because this is probably the question that you are asked as curators more than more than any other. Kind of, are the artists in Notes from the Ether, can they really be considered artists? Kind of, are they technologists? Kind of, is the AI, that or the technology they're using a tool? Is it the output? So, same question. I'm curious to get Clara and Deborah's answer to that.
I think there's also, like Memo said in the talk, like AI is such a vast field, and there are so many different ways of working with it. Even in the show alone, we have so many different kinds of ways of working with different parts of AI using different tools. Like Rimbawan's work, takes from an AI-generated face sort of website called "This Person Does Not Exist," and that's very distinct from Memo's way of working with AI. And that's also different from Ninad's way of working with AI, where he trained a custom model on Stable Diffusion, and that's again distinct from Holly Herndon and Matt Dryher's way of working with AI that focuses more on sound, but also on text to image using like VQGAN and CLIP. So I think it really comes down to what exactly is happening, but also artistic intention, and the relationship that I think the artist shares with the work. There's also this artist Boris Eldikson. You may know him from the Sony Photography Award earlier in the year, where he was awarded the grand prize, came out and declared that actually the work is AI generated. He talks then in that context about promptography, about how, as a photographer, instead of thinking about light, particles, and how it interacts with camera apparatus, he's thinking about the relationships in language, and then that intertextuality of like your prompting, the way that you're crafting your language, how you're speaking to the model, if it's model trained by someone else. So I think there's a lot of nuances and a lot of intentionality, a lot of trial and error that actually goes into it, rather than really, sometimes I think we oversimplify the process and imagine it to be simply typing like a couple of words into DALL-E 2 and there you go, that's the work. But rather, most artists either are training their own custom programs, writing their own software, or even if engaging with these sort of mass models of text to image, there's still this iterative process that is taking place to eventually allow them to express themselves in the way that's most true to what they want. So yeah, I think like Memo said, perhaps the tools are evolving, the ways of working are looking different, but the artistic intention, the reason why artists are creating are not so different from the before.
So we have new concepts, promptography, AI wrangler, lion tamer. Are there any other kind of concepts or modalities that you would want to add to that, Deborah?
I mean, I feel like definitely what has happened in the social sphere with AI is that there is a comfort level that people are getting closer to with this technology. And obviously, what we see in the news is a spectrum, and it's a lot about extremes. It's a lot about giant technological anxiety, and it's a lot about co-pilot and assistance. But I think in reality, it's nuanced. It is an extremely personal journey. As a curator, artists to me are like these wonderful beings that are able to kind of harness these latest technologies and push the boundaries of their work. And to me, the full respect and power lies with the individual and the artist themselves. And until, I guess, obviously, machines are trained on large language models which reflect human tastes. So maybe that in itself, the AI is also reflecting the human, the AI is also reflecting the artist. There's a feedback loop that's going on. So I'm a bit more with Memo here, where I don't see a distinction. And I see a kind of very subtle nuance and personal complexity that comes to adopting technologies as humanity and society. Yeah.
I actually feel like this is a wonderful note to end on, and I do apologize. I know we have a couple more questions from the floor, but I've got my, must end kind of notes from my colleagues at the back. I want to thank all of our panelists and speakers today. Can we give everybody a round of applause? Thank you. Thank you, Clara Pay. Thank you, Deborah Lim. But a very special thank you to Memo, who has flown all the way from Los Angeles to be with us today. Thank you so much for your insights, Memo. I feel we were extraordinarily fortunate to be taken on this journey by Memo. I want to kind of just share that Notes from the Ether, which is on downstairs in the level 3 galleries, is in its final few days. So we have just a few more days. It ends on the 24th of September. You're most welcome to go to the exhibition now. Tickets can be bought from the downstairs box office or any of the ticketing machines. I highly recommend going and seeing it. If you want to ask Deborah or Clara any questions about the exhibition, they'll be here for a few minutes afterwards. We have 2 of the artists from the exhibition kind of with us in the audience today, and obviously Memo here with us on stage. Finally, a thank you to my colleagues kind of for putting together today's event, kind of to our colleagues in public programs and museum services. Thank you for your work. And thank you to all of you for sharing your Saturday afternoon with us. That's the end of today's program. Thanks again.